My name is Ramon.
Hi, I'm Wesley.
And today we're going to talk about Azure Front Door services.
So, what is it?
Well, Azure Front Door services is a kind of a cool service which is actually multiple services in one. So what it is initially it is a content delivery network. And in this case, a Azure Content Delivery Network, which means that you can host your content within Azure and it will be pushed out to multiple edge points all across Azure. Well, what are edge points? Within Azure you have multiple entry points to the whole network. So for example, a few in Europe, a few in America, a few in Asia. And if you want to connect with Azure, that's where you go to, and then you're in the Azure network and you can use the backbone of Azure to connect to the rest. So that's cool. It. But what it will do with content, it will push it out to those endpoints. So if you try to connect from Europe or from the Americas, it doesn't matter, you get the same load time while the server is still in Europe.
Well, that's cool.
But that's not just it, right? Because what it also uses the edge points for is something called split TCP, which basically allows you directly to connect with the edge point. And yeah, when you set up a connection, right, you have to do a handshake, you have the whole HTTPS and HTTP stuff and stuff like that. And normally if you would have to do that from your location, let's say you live in Americas and you go to Europe, that's back and forth over a longer connection that takes a while. But if you do that with a very short edge location in your neighborhood, right, it goes quite fast. And in the background, Azure will do the same, but within the backbone, but it can reuse the same connection for multiple clients. So there's a speed wins there.
That's a lot of info.
Yeah, well, there we go, right? A lot of info just at the start, right? And what's cool about it as well is that this is a typical example of something where HTTP2 can really be benefiting of having a OpenTCP connection and multiple connections going over the same thing. So that's just awesome. But yeah, next to that, right, I said it's multiple services in one, right? So that now we just talked about the CN part, but we also have the Web Application Firewall. And in this case, the Web Application Firewall allows you to block or to detect, it depends on how you set it up, of course. For example, attacks like SQL injection, XSS, you can do geo-filtering, you can do rate limiting, you can put IP restrictions on it, like the whole bunch, right? A lot of mitigation and management. But also, you can do some bot managing, like how you want to have the bots manage or interpret with your site. Or even DDoS protection as well. So that's a lot of stuff straight available, right? But then we're not done yet, because there's a third service hidden in there, which is load balancing. So if you have multiple services within your landscape, it can automatically determine which it should use, do round robin and health checks and stuff like that. I do have to mention that it's a layer 7 load balancer, so that means it's on the HTTP level. And yeah, what that means, I advise you to look that up. It's cool to look at it. But what I'm going to show you today is just how easy it is to actually set it up. And like the list of benefits that I just listed, I mean, come on, you should try it out.
So I'm quite a noob, so tell me.
All right,
I'm curious.
So, what we're going to do, of course, I prepared a little bit already, just to, for the demo effect, right, that it looks cool. So what I did is I prepared a set of web apps, one in North Europe, one in West Europe. Of course, right, they have the same functionality, so we're gonna load balance them. I have prepared Azure Function. Why? I'll tell you that later. And of course I have a nice front end, which we will be caching and pushing out to the edges, which is hosted on a storage account with static web hosting. So, let's get started. Of course, right, a create button, everybody knows where that is in the Azure portal. But everything that I'm going to do right now is of course also available via Bicep, ARM, ACCLI and stuff like that. So if you want to automate it, you can do that. But yeah, the documentation from Microsoft is quite extensive and will help you with that regard. So in this case, I'm just quickly going to search for Azure Front Door, and I'm just going to say create one. And in this case, right, we immediately get a question like, how do you want to go forwards? In this case, I'm just going to do Azure Front Door, and I'm going to do custom create. But if you, the first time you set this up, then a quick create might be ideal as well. It is important to mention that Azure Front Door currently has multiple tiers, which are standard and premium, but there's also a classic one.
Okay.
And the classic one itself, that's basically from the first version of Azure Front Door. And by now it has changed a little bit. There are some differences between that. So if you want to set up a new one, I definitely recommend using the standard or the premium. But if you're still on a classic, then I would also check out what you can do with the new ones.
Okay. So if I have got the classic one, should I migrate to the new one?
It's still available, and Microsoft still supports it. You can still create new ones. So for now, yeah, you're quite safe.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it would be smart in the long run, yeah, to just stay with the latest and the greatest. Yeah, it's a safer future. Let's say.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so let's go forward. Yeah, I prepared a resource group and everything. And yeah, my resource group is in West Europe, but Azure Front Door service is a global instance, so you don't have to specify location, it's just everywhere. So I'm just gonna do something real quick, back the talks demo.
So it's a response, like you're saying global, so the response for CDN is like, well, everywhere the same throughout the globe. Is that the same thing for load balancing and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, yeah, it can still differ a little bit, but it will make sure, or it will try its best to deliver that. And right, so if you're hosting static content, right, it will use the caching, so it is near you. And otherwise, if you're using an API, it will use the split TCP to fast track your connection. And in that regard, if you look at the network perspective, also going over the Microsoft backbone is quicker because there's a shorter route in terms of hops. Well, if you go over the public internet, there might be more hops and you have less control over it. So, yeah.
Well, that's really cool. It sounds like it can do a lot of stuff for me without me having to know how it specifically works.
Exactly, right, and that's awesome. All right, so first off, I'm going to skip between over secrets, but what's cool with it, you can directly import your certificates from an Azure Key Vault, for example. So if you have a custom domain with a certificate on it, it will just take care of that for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
So completely integrated into the Microsoft architecture.
Exactly,
landscape.
exactly.
Cool.
So, well, of course, what we're creating right now is a profile, and the profile can contain multiple endpoints. And an endpoint is, an endpoint. It's a URL you can go to, and that's where it's available. Okay. So we're gonna add one right now. Yeah, let's do FDS Beta Talks demo. I'm gonna straight enable it, and you can also see that I immediately get a Front Door service URL. Yeah.
Ah. Is there a reason why you should disable it? Because the option is right there.
Well, yeah, that really. So you can have multiple endpoints, right, managing from one instance. So it could be that you want to enable or disable it on that level, but that really is up to you. I don't from a theoretical point. I don't think there's a very strong opinion to say yes or no.
Okay, all right.
So I'm going to add that. You immediately get this massive view, and this is the Azure Front Door Manager. And you'll also find that later on if you would hop back into the portal. But first thing now, we see one of our endpoints. Then on the left we see routes, and on the right we see our security policy. So right now I'm just going to dive into the left side to the routes, and I'm going to add our first route. And for our first route, what I want to do is add our API. Okay. So I'm just going to call it API. And we say our API currently lives on everything that is below /API/star, right? So with this we say if a request is coming in /API, then just forward it to that. Okay. So, well, we say we accept HTTP and HTTPS. Of course, right, if you want to have HTTPS only, you can enforce that here as well. Then I can say how it should redirect the traffic. So, for example, if I have a service internally which only supports HTTP and I can protect it properly, then you can do that here as well. Okay. But then we're into another new terminology as well, which is origin groups. And with Azure Front Door, you have something called origin, which is a service like the API, the web API. Yeah. And from the perspective of Front Door, it's where it should get the data, right? So the origin of your data. That's the easiest explanation. And you can group those, right? So we have one in West Europe and we have one in North Europe. Both are one origin, but if you put them together, they're origin group. So that's what we're going to create right now, a new one.
But what if I have the situation like one service in Azure, one service in Google Cloud, and one on-prem? Is that something I can add here as well?
It's not a problem. That's the magic of it. Nice. It's not limited to Azure, right? Of course, if you use Azure functionality or services, the integration is a little bit better, but it's not limited to it as well. Okay. So we're going to do the API group real quick. And like I mentioned, I need to add a group. So I'm just going to say North EU API. Well, in this case, right, I can choose for the app services, but yeah, if you want to do a custom one, you can just place custom and you can fill in the rest and it works as well. In this case, I'm just going to say app servers, And I'm going to say the North Europe one, and that's it. So now it automatically picks up that I'm running on the correct ports and stuff like that. And I can also configure the priority and the weight. That has to do with the load balancing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. Yeah. And of course I can disable it. So if you have a pool and one service, I don't know, you need to repair it or something like that, or it just goes down, you can also just disable it here and enable it later on. Then I'm quickly going to add the other one as well.
So, quick question: you have priority and you have weight. What is the difference between the two?
The difference between priority and weight, right? Priority is whichever you take first, and with the weight you can, for example, determine if, like if you have 100 total weight, right, and you say 60 goes to the one and 40 goes to the other, then 60% of the traffic goes to one API endpoint and 40% go to the other. So you can determine which first and second, and then you can even determine how the load should be differentiated as well.
Cool.
So I'm just quickly going to add my West Europe as well, and I'm going to add as well. Okay. So that's cool. We got that set up. In this case, we got a health endpoint. So I'm just going to define that, use HTTPS, do a get, and that's it. And yeah, the health points are being used to just make sure, is the service healthy? If it isn't, then it will of course not provide it. That's the good thing about load balancing. So we add it. Then there's one final thing that we need to do, because in this case it's simple. But if you, for example, you have /API on your front door service and your internals API also uses /API, you should define that it, of course, pastes the correct URL behind the in the correct path when calling the API. Okay. So for now, we're going to leave caching off, and I'm just going to say add. And for now, that's all I'm allowed to add. We'll get to the rest later.
So
I'm
I'm
just
not allowed to add something extra?
Yeah, we can do that later. For right now, this is the installation wizard, so we take one step at a time. But right now, I'm just going to create it. This should take a short seconds, but we can cut with the magic of video editing if we want. Oh, it's already done, you can see.
Oh, cool.
But the content is pushed out, and that's where it can take a little bit longer. That's where you have caching and stuff like that. But that's.
So what's gonna happen when I edit the configuration? And you mentioned caching. How long is it gonna take for me to?
That depends on how you configure your caching, right? But there's this awesome button on the top left where you can say purge all my caches, and then everything is gone. And that's your hard reset button. It's your hammer next to your PC.
That's really cool. Like just testing. Oh, I want my settings just now loaded into the cache and purge that all cache.
There we go.
Okay.
Let's see. It's still loading a little bit, so we give it a little bit more time to make sure that it is.
It looks like it's still deploying as well.
It said it was done, but I'm not convinced about it yet.
Yeah, top right bar, the notifications.
Aha, yeah, it's still working.
Okay.
Well, let's see if we can add the rest already. I hope it doesn't mind. So APIs are cool, but we need a front end. So what we can do is we can add some static content to it. Well, in this case, I talked about these endpoints, these domains, right? This is where you can see the cool thing. You can use the same routes for multiple endpoints and stuff like that. So, for example, if you have a domain, I don't know, cloud.betabit.nl, and you also have azure.betabit.nl, you could theoretically use exactly the same thing for the sake of configuration. But yeah, cloud is Azure and Azure is cloud, so why not, right?
It's pretty much the same.
So in this case, we're just going to leave it at the root because, if people want to visit the site, then they should immediately be served with that. I need to add a new origin group, so I'm going to add that. I'm just going to call it front end. And in this case, we choose the static website for storage. Of course, it will list whatever I have available, and the rest is magic again. I can just spray add, and that's it. In this case, we can do still health probes, but it's a storage, so I hope it's available.
It's static.
Yeah, for now I'm just going to disable it real quick and I'm going to add it. In this case, I want to enable caching because, like I mentioned, push it out to the edge points. And this is where you get first, of course, an important question is how it should handle query strings.
Okay.
Because if you have just a normal SPA application and you use query strings to manipulate the UI, it might not be interested to use it for caching. But if you use query strings to make calls to your APIs or to something that's in the backend, then you definitely want to make sure your cache is unique per unique query string combination.
Yeah.
So that's what you determine here. You can even specify specific ones that should work. For now I'm just going to say ignore it because I'm just hosting all my static content here and query strings are not going to be sent to the backend.
Okay.
You can also enable compression, which is just for to speed up the traffic even more and make them lightweight. So I'm going to enable that as well.
Is there also a con? Why shouldn't you enable it?
There might be certain situations where compression is not ideal. It's also limited to just a small set of compressions. Okay. I believe 2 of them. I don't know the names on the top of my head. So if you not supported with those, then it might be a challenge. I think most of the typical browsers support the ones they use, but that's always something to keep in mind. This can take a little bit again. So it's the effect of the weight of always. But what we always can do is already, it's currently working. Just going to go back there and check out the front door manager. Okay, so the API group is there. We're still waiting for the other one. And in the meantime, I'll explain something about security policy. So I mentioned that it also is a WAF, right? So we've now seen some CDN stuff hidden away. Load balancer was quite prominently there. And the WAF is something we can do separately as well. So what we can do is we just call it WAF for now with a demo name as well. I want to say, okay, which domains does this need to have again? And then I can choose one. Well, I've already made one, but creating one is simple as just providing a name in it and that's it. Because afterwards you can then configure it individually as well. But the cool thing about this as well is that if you have this WAF setup and you have multiple services or front door services, they can all use the same configuration. So it could be that a security officer is managing the WAF and at the same time developers are doing the front door service. That can be separated as well.
So is the policy like a separate resource which you can reference?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. And in that regard, right, front door service profile and then endpoints and all that kind of sense are all different resources. And especially when you're working with Bicep, you'll see that as well, that they're split up. So that gives you some flexibility.
Cool.
Well, they're now both taking a little while. But because of that, right, it is quite fast, but you never know on Azure. I've quickly prepared the setup that I already explained just yet with one more final thing, which is an Azure Function app as well, which listens to /API/func. That's it. And just like that, I can go to my Azure Front Door service as well. I go there. And I should, of course, copy the right content.
Well, it's not copying it.
It's there we go. All right, so this is my static content. It's a view application, and there are 2 buttons on it. And with one, I can say, get me the server location. So now it's calling one of the APIs.
Cool.
And now is the question how the load balancing is today. It's not. Well, I am in West Europe, so
it's correct.
Yeah, it is correct. So that's one thing. And of course, for the function API location, I can also request that, and he also immediately responds. But the idea around it is now, if I would travel to Asia, it would still respond the same thing.
Cool.
And everything is working. Everything is happy ever after. And that's Azure Front Door services.
Well, it's pretty complicated, but also really cool.
Yeah. I hope you liked it, and thank you for watching. And see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.